To call this video right here, and the story it tells disturbing, I honestly can't watch it, and tough to watch is an understatement. This is a 13-year-old cheerleader who appears to be forced into a split, being held down by her coach and other cheerleaders for more than 20 seconds, despite her pleas. You hear the pleas there. Again, it's really hard to watch, so I get if you need to close your eyes for a minute.
No. You're gonna make it worse.
Now he picks her up and throws her away when he's done.
The coach told her daughter it was the best way to get the splits and called it a rite of passage.
Somebody had attacked my little girl, and people sat around and let it happen, and nobody stopped them.
Police detectives are now investigating the case as a possible child abuse. 5 employees at the cheerleading camp have been placed on leave, including the coach seen in the video. None have replied to CNN's requests for comment. Stephanie Britt is a cheerleading coach. She's with us on the phone. Dr. Devi Nampiaparampil is an associate professor at NYU Medical and joins us also on this story. You know, Stephanie, I have to tell you, I was a cheerleader in middle school. I spent a number of years in gymnastics. I have never seen anything like this or seen anybody say, this is the way you learn how to do a split. Have you?
No, never. I've owned my gym for 18 years and have cheered, all of my life, and my daughters both cheer. And I've got wonderful friends in the cheer industry all over the country, and everyone knows that is the opposite way to get more flexible, because you're going to become injured. So that's not at all standard, or I've never seen it done. And it's so sad, because I'm sure this little girl now has torn muscle, so you're going to become injured by trying to force the split this way, when everyone knows that you have to do static stretching, which means slow and controlled stretching, sure, past comfortable, and you hold it for a minute for months. You can't force a split in 20 seconds without becoming injured. That's just an egregious breach of all safety and protocol in our sport.
I am literally speechless every time I see that video. Dr. Devi, Stephanie brings up the point of, obviously you could end up with a lot of damage, and significant damage, if you're forcing this on someone and then holding them in that position. Walk us through what it could do, especially to a growing young girl.
Well, I agree with Stephanie. I mean, the first thing you worry about is muscle tears, right? So for most of us, let's say we try to do a split. We're going to hit some resistance at some point, right? Usually it's the hamstring. So if you force yourself through that resistance, what can happen is, perhaps the hamstrings can stretch, but more likely they can actually tear. So you can tear through the muscle. Sometimes they'll tear on either end. So the hamstrings connect between the pelvis and the knee, so you can tear the tendon on either end. And sometimes, the tendon, let's say it's strong enough to resist that tearing, it can actually rip off a piece of bone. So rip off a piece of bone in the pelvis, or potentially the bone actually starts to bend and breaks, which is called a stress fracture.
So this is all horrible, I have to say. Like, as you're saying it, I'm sort of visualizing it. It seems miserable. But also, what's the recovery like for someone?
So it depends. So, in terms of a muscle tear, it takes a long time for muscle to heal. Same thing with tendon tears. Bones repair more quickly, but as Stephanie mentioned, this is not the way to get flexibility. You have an injury, and then if you're thinking about cheerleading or doing something that's physically intense, in fact, the recovery is more along the lines of bed rest or relative rest until these things heal. So that's, that's a potential issue. Now, we talked about the hamstrings, but there are other muscles, so the inner thigh as well. The quadriceps that are the front of the thigh, any of them can potentially have this problem, or the bone. But I would say even the psychological impact is maybe equal to or greater than the physical impact.
I would think so. And Stephanie, just in terms of that, the other part of that shocked me is just the fact that this lasted so long and so many people appear to be involved in it. Was that surprising to you, Stephanie?
Because it was sickening, but what was so sad is I believe it was a culture that they kind of developed there and became normal. It seems as if everyone around thought that was normal, acceptable protocol, which is more disturbing. It wasn't an isolated incident. It became kind of a rite of passage, it seems. So I'm just going to assume, and there's two sides to every story, and I certainly don't want to bash or but it just seems like possibly this coach wasn't educated, didn't know. Maybe he was very flexible and thought that everyone could just be that flexible. I mean, I've definitely worked with people who don't understand. Everyone has a different normal range. And this child's range of flexibility was less than average, and you can't force it. So I don't think he was aware that he was hurting her. I think he really thought, oh, all these other girls I can put in a split and they can do the split. So I just believe he was uneducated and sort of created an environment that these other girls bought into. And so, you know, football coaches stretch their players, gymnastics coaches, as you talked about, Erica, acro dancers. So we're all used to stretching. And it's not fun. It can be painful. And I will admit, there's a lot of rigorous stretching or training that goes on into high-level sports.
But even when it's painful, you don't see people crying out in that way. And to your point, I think that's what was so disturbing.
Yeah, it was abuse, and somehow this poor kid wanted to be a part, right? She wanted to fit in. She wanted to cheer. So what's more disturbing is that she went back to practice the next day. And so, you know, she wanted so desperately to be a part of the team and the team, you know, experience that even she bought into the fact that I think she thought this was okay. And so I think what I learned from this, and I want to implement it in my gym, and a friend of mine mentioned it as a gym owner, is there needs to be some sort of code word or safe word, like when is too much too much? And that's for every athlete. When you're running sprints for your track coach, you don't need to have a heat stroke. You know, there has to be a safe word that we come up with as coaches. And
it's important to bring that up. We're going to have to leave it there. We are out of time. I do want to point out we've been running a number of statements on the screen, but in terms of the coach telling the Denver Post, again, CNN reached out. We have not received comment, but you can definitely say that what was in the video could be seen in a different light. I'd love to tell my story, but I can't say anything else at this time. So clearly more to come out here. Britt, Dr. Devi Nampiaparampil, good to have both of you with us. Thank you.